Welcome everybody tuning into Neurotransformations, where we discuss healing and transformations. Today, I have the privilege to talk to Jess Brain, who is an aerobics instructor. She is also a brain fitness coach, and just the name Brain alone was so cool to meet and know that her name was Brain, like one of my favorite topics. And I'm super happy and excited to be able to talk to her today. And we're going to chat about a lot of different things, such as her past, how she got into brain fitness, and what she's done in the past, what she's doing now, and kind of where she sees herself headed in the future. But anyhow, thank you so much for coming on here, Jess. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me, Brody. Great to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so my first question for you is, with the name Brain, how it seems kind of intuitively obvious that you started to eventually learn about the brain, but where did that journey begin for you, where you started to find a passion for it?
Well, it was actually about 20 years ago. I was just finishing high school. I was working for a not-for-profit, and a friend said to me, "What does the name Jessica mean?" Which is my full name. And I said, "Oh, I don't know." And she's like, "What? You don't know what your name means?" And, of course, at that age, I was mortified, thinking, oh my God, everyone must know what their name means. So I ran home, found out what Jessica meant. And I thought, well, with the last name like Brain, I should really know something about the brain too, in case anyone ever asks me. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I found John Medina's book called Brain Rules, and it was an absolute page turner, and I just fell in love with it. And I started reading everything I could about the brain. And of course, every day there's something new and exciting that we discover about the brain. And I just find that so fascinating and inspiring and exciting. So I spent many years just in my spare time researching and reading about the brain. And while I was working for this not-for-profit, I thought, hold up, what am I doing? I should really switch careers. So I started working for a neuroscience research company in Australia, and I was loving that, but then decided I wanted to be in New York, which to me was the center of neuroscience research. So I packed up my bags and sold my car, everything, and moved to New York and started working in a mental health center where primarily we treated people with neurofeedback. So neurofeedback, non-invasive, pain-free, medication-free approach to rewiring people's brains, helping people with depression, anxiety, stress, epilepsy, even schizophrenia. There's a full range of the things that it can really help. So that's been fantastic past 5 years, but I've also spent a lot of time, especially during the pandemic. It was where I had a little bit of extra time to apply all of my research. And I started doing one-on-one brain fitness coaching calls with people across America, and primarily using neurobic exercises and mindfulness exercises, as well as looking at people's diet and lifestyle and seeing what elements that they could tweak. So that's, sort of my history and how I got to this point, and a brain fitness coach, and still loving it every day. And with my last name, like Brain, I think it's, something that's never going to go away. It's a classic case of, where my career is going to take me. And so I love it. And so I think the future really is, it has to be Dr. Brain. Has to be Dr. Brain.
100%. That's so funny because I had the last name Miller, and it was a kind of limiting last name in some ways, because I was a drinker. I'm not going to lie to the audience in the past. And it was not the right thing. Look up alcohol in the brain. Andrew Huberman, one of my favorite neuroscientist guys, was just talking about how bad alcohol is on our brain. And that's not to make people feel guilty about drinking a little bit here and there. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's his perspective. And it also didn't serve me so well. But back to neurobics, I wanted to ask you, what do you define neurobics as for the audience? And as well, I would love to dive into some of your favorite aerobic exercises.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to share. So neurobics are unique brain training exercises that involve one or more of the senses, can involve also mindfulness and attention focus practices, novelty, as well as communication. And I think that's a big one that a lot of the time we just sort of brush over, and we're not consciously aware of how we are communicating. And that can be a really effective way to retrain the brain, and also our thought processes and how we're thinking about certain things. So the great thing about neurobics, they're very simple. You don't need a lot of technology, and anyone can do it at any age. Now, the science behind it shows that these exercises actually stimulate the full length of the hippocampus, and that they encourage the brain to produce more neurotrophins. So more BDNF, more growth factors, which are basically like miracle grow nutrients for the brain, so that it can increase the strength and length and size of the dendrites. And this is obviously involved in improving memory and learning, problem solving, creativity, even boosting your mood. Mm-hmm. So these are just really fantastic simple exercises that anyone can do at home. You don't really need a lot of equipment. I think the most famous one that people are aware of is the idea that you will brush your hand with your less dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, you would brush with your left hand. Now, that I did that for a while pre-pandemic. But I advise people not to do that in the morning if you're rushing, because my gums got very sore where I was like trying to do it with my left hand. But as I've got a little bit better with practice, then I would incorporate perhaps standing on one leg while you brush your teeth with your left hand. Then you move perhaps not brushing your teeth in the bathroom, but brushing your teeth in the kitchen, so that you can change your environment at the same time. And then maybe you close your eyes while you're doing it. So there's all these like different challenge levels that you can add to it. But there can also be something like, okay, so I've got here like a banana. Now the exercise with the banana is you could just look at it for a bit, and you could think about, okay, what does it taste like? Can you imagine that taste in your mind's eye? Imagine what it's going to feel like. Think about any sort of sharp corners it might have, rough edges. Think about, does it make any sounds on its own? What sort of sound would it make if you threw it against the wall? What other uses could you use for it other than just eating it? So that also allows people to think differently, think a little bit more creatively, and that is not only sort of strengthening our current neural wiring, but also creating new wiring at the same time. So there's lots of ways that you can encourage these sort of new ways of thinking by just items that you have around your home.
Exactly. Neurobics, in the word, you can think about it, it's flexible, just like you're trying to become more flexible in any exercise, or especially stretching, but you're like stretching the brain, like how the brain is somewhat of a muscle in expanding and contracting. And we, of course, want the expansion. I love the creativity aspect of neurobics, especially that, like you said, with the banana, think of it with like all your five senses, and even imagine the future of, like, throwing it against the wall, or how it would taste, and how that stimulates that BDNF, like you said, was like the miracle growth for the brain. And it was funny because I learned a little bit about neurobics, and I was like walking outside in the sun and people backwards, and people are looking at you like you're crazy, but
I've done that many times too, in New York in Central Park, where it's quite busy, and I'm like running backwards, walking backwards, also looking over my shoulder, make sure I'm not going to run into anyone. People too look like you're crazy, but I just smile. Sometimes I'll wave at people. And that sort of, I feel, adds to it, because you're adding in that positive emotion, you're creating that social connection, and also just letting people know that, you know, you're just having fun and being playful. And my hope is that one day I'm going to see a lot more other people, you know, walking backwards in the park, and I'm just just starting a new trend.
it's so funny because you know, that's part of it, is the playfulness, and the brain loves playfulness. It adds that extra effect of the emotion. And especially in a place like the Big Apple, New York, people are going to look at you funny no matter what, usually.
It's true, but the thing is, when you're smiling, it sort of breaks down that barrier a little bit and creates that connection. Even if it's just a simple smile, I like to think that that will have a ripple effect.
Yes.
Because a smile is actually teaching your brain and your body that you're happy. So, and then you can pass on that happiness to somebody else. And when you're smiling, you can try it. It's actually very hard to think about anything negative. Your
Right.
brain has been hardwired over the years that if you're smiling, you know, your brain can't think about anything else. And so that rewiring is really fantastic. And it's something that every Saturday morning I host a laughter yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the exercises that I will give to people as a sort of a parting suggestion from the class is, when you go home, you know, put on a smile and see how long you can keep it there. And when you notice that that smile falls off, go and grab it again and put it back on and see how long you can keep it there, you know, until your cheeks hurt and you know, need to give yourself a little face massage. Once again, it's a simple exercise that anyone can do, that we all have at our disposal.
And I can tell you without a doubt, coming from a recovering pessimist, that this stuff actually does work. Like, your brain really does not know the difference between like a laughter. And yeah, it is true, like act as if, fake it until you make it. It is just strange how that neural circuitry does occur. Like you said, we're wired for it, if we're smiling, then there's not a lot to worry about. Or how you mentioned, like laughing, it might seem fake at first, but just like any other activity, you know, let's say that you want to be a bodybuilder, you get up and you just, maybe the first repetition, it's not going to feel good. It's similar with your smile right there.
Absolutely. Well, same with laughter. I've now been hosting the Laughter Cup for 2 years. And I was even thinking yesterday, I think I laugh more freely now. And probably a little bit more, and it's more relaxed, because I've spent 2 years every Saturday with a group of people, initially fake laughing, but the fake laughter leads to so much genuine laughter, and it's a complete giggle fest. I like to think that I'm creating an overnight 6-pack. And as someone said in the class the other day, it's not called the Laughter Club, it should be called the Cheek Gym, because your cheeks get a workout too. So it's a lot of fun. And the great thing is, again, anyone can do it at any age. You don't need to be funny. It's not about telling jokes. And it's, even though it's traditionally called laughter yoga, it's not yoga in the traditional sense. There's no spandex or downward dog. It's just called yoga because it's about breathing. It's about using, you know, the universal life force, the prana, the energy that we have within us through the breath work. And by breathing and laughing and exhaling more than we are inhaling, we can actually help to detoxify our body and our brain, get more fresh oxygen in, get rid of the stale oxygen that sits at the bottom of our lungs. So I call it brain-based laughter yoga. We have a lot of fun, and I always slip in my research that I found that week on how we can help increase our brain potential, because as any of my close friends will tell you, give me 5 minutes and I'm going to be talking to you about brain health in some shape or form.
Yeah, like you go to Thanksgiving and you're talking to your family about brain health.
Absolutely. Meet someone on the street for 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's like with the laughter again, like it literally does. It releases neurotransmitters like, we're talking like epinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, things of that nature just by laughing, adrenaline release, and try it out.
And endorphins too. So people who are suffering from pain, if they're laughing for about 10 to 15 minutes instead of the sweet spot, then that can actually mean that we can cope with the pain a little bit more. But the thing is, if we're just laughing on our own, say we're watching a movie, we're not going to be able to increase all those neurochemicals to the level that we need, because we're only laughing for maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Especially as adults, we take life way too seriously. We don't have enough play. We're not silly. We're scared to be silly and vulnerable. Whereas when you look at children, they laugh about 300 to 400 times a day. They're always playing. They're always being silly. And, that to me is why their brains are so sort of fertile and always growing new neurons, part of neurogenesis. But as adults, we sort of get caught up in the seriousness and we forget to laugh and take life way too seriously. So that's why by having laughter as a regular practice, you can actually, I like to think that it has a ripple effect of joy that travels with you, throughout your whole day and week. Anyone that you meet, that you might just relax a little bit more and not take life so seriously.
Absolutely. I wanted to switch subjects just a little bit. I wanted to ask you about neurohacking, biohacking, some of these things that we can do as humans. We can change our environment. We can create novelty. We can exercise. There's so many things that we can do and take action upon that actually affects our neurochemicals and our biochemistry. I wanted to know, what are some of your favorite activities that may be a little bit off the normal schedule for somebody that they can take, maybe like the top 5 bio or neuro hacks that we can do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, of course, there's exercise. That's a big one. I don't think that we really, are really optimizing our body that way. Movement is really key, and that's why like Tai Chi and yoga, I find it like great, because they're moving the right hand side of the body over to the left and vice versa. And by doing that, we're actually helping to bridge the 2 hemispheres of the brain together, so we can improve our cognitive efficiency and speed as well as memory. But in saying that, one thing that I recently just invested in a Kangen water machine. Are you familiar with that, Brody?
I'm not, no.
So it's a Japanese medical grade device that is used across Asia in hospitals to help treat people and help people heal. And it's not just a filtration device, but it also ionizes and purifies the water to make it alkaline. So it electrolyzes the water so that it actually will restructure the molecules. So a lot of the water molecules that are found currently just in regular tap water have been broken, but the Kangen water machine will restructure it. So the structure is the same as what you'll find in natural healing springs around the world.
Wow.
So by taking this water, it can actually get into the body more easily because of this new form structure. And so it's very hydrating for the body. It has healing properties. I've been drinking now Kangen water for over a month, and I feel I sleep better. I have more energy. I definitely notice my skin is better. I have a friend who has been struggling with a lot of health issues. And so I've been taking a gallon of water over to her every couple of days. And she's noticed how hydrating it is for her too. So, I mean, when we think about it, water is, our brains and our bodies are made up of 70 to 85% water.
Mm-hmm.
So we should really be considering this the number one nutrient that we need to make sure is top quality.
Absolutely.
And not just buying alkaline bottled water, because that's chemically induced alkaline. And that is only contributing more plastic to landfill or to the oceans.
Right.
So by having one of these Kangen water machines, I no longer have to buy a bottled water. I know that it's good for me and it's good for the environment. So I'm just so happy to have this machine in my home. And actually, I'm traveling with it across the country. Everyone's like, damn, you must really love this water. That is one commitment. And the great thing is, Brody, I can walk through the airport with my full bottle of water. And they're like, oh, you need to tip that out. I was like, no, I don't. It's medical grade water. And so they just quickly test it for me. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're right. That is. There you go. Continue along your way with your bottle of water. I'm like, kind of feel like I'm cheating the system. And I'm like, hey, look at me. I got through with my water. So, yeah, that's super fantastic. And like, when you think about it, our bodies are like a hydraulic system. Mm-hmm. So that's why drinking top quality water as well as exercising is so important, because you could just be drinking water, but if you're not moving at the same time, then that water that's in your body is just sitting there stagnant. Mm-hmm. So that's why having the two goes very well in tandem. Now, the other thing that I did the other day, I've done it a couple of times now, was to jump into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Have you ever done that?
I have, yes, because I had brain surgery 6 years ago, and my mom, she was ahead of the time. She put me into that chamber, and back then I was like, what the heck is this? And people will sometimes still come to my place and they'll be like, what is that? It looks like something from outer space or something.
Yeah, it does a little.
It was great for me. I would love to know your experience with the chamber.
Yeah. Well, I just have used it just for peak performance, basically. Mm-hmm. I wanted to test it out. And I've heard about the benefits of it improving sort of memory, just for healing as well, for brain and body, whether that be just for peak performance, or I know a lot of people use it before they're going to go and have surgery, or even after they've had surgery, so that they can improve the healing process. But yeah, I've done it a couple of times now in Australia. And then recently, when I was just in California, I found a place that offered it, and they offered the hard shell.
Yeah.
So, which is much better pressure that you can get out of a hard shell rather than the soft shell.
Okay.
Yeah. So I guess when I've done it a couple of times, I think you need to do it consecutively. The therapist that I met just the other day said, roughly maybe 6 sessions before you'd really notice it. But when I did it in Australia, I noticed that I felt a little bit more energized. Mm-hmm. I thought everything seemed a little sharper and brighter and more colorful. So I just know the benefits of it. And it's such a simple, easy thing to do. You can get in there. I just choose to meditate and just to breathe and just to be still for a moment. But you can be on there on your phone. You can read a book. All it is just sort of being still for a moment and breathing in this high pressured oxygen. So it's really, really fantastic. For anyone who hasn't tried it, highly recommend it. Yeah, for sure. And I guess the other thing would be to meditate. Everyone should be doing that. I guess when I've been in New York, my form of meditation was neurofeedback, as I
Mhm.
mentioned to you before,
Right.
because after 5 years of working in a neurofeedback center and seeing the incredible changes in people, it's a real no-brainer to do this if you can, if you have that available. And there are now lots of neurofeedback centers across the country and the world. And as a non-invasive, pain-free, medication-free approach, you don't need to have anything wrong with you.
Mhm.
You can just do this at peak performance. And that's why I chose to do it. And what I noticed was that when I was working and it was getting stressful in a mental health center, people are unhappy. It did get stressful. But when I was doing neurofeedback on a consistent basis, I would notice that I could handle the stress.
Nice.
I could still have a conversation with people. I could still hear what was happening. I wouldn't lash out or swear. and I could respond to them, and I wouldn't feel that stress in my body. So that to me is a phenomenal thing to, have that clarity of thought. It improves memory, and reducing stress for me was just really fantastic.
Beautiful.
And I think the last thing would be neurobics, just because it's something that does encourage a lot of play. It's fun. It's really simple, but a great way to increase neurogenesis. And there's a lot of science that says, that a high rate of neurogenesis can mean that we can avoid cognitive decline.
Mhm.
Because our brains have all this extra wiring, basically like a backup plan.
Mhm.
So even if you do have a brain injury or signs of cognitive decline in the brain, your brain won't actually exhibit any signs of cognitive decline, because your brain still has all this extra highway to travel down and function. So I think that'd be my top 5.
Awesome. What I wanted to talk a little bit about seasonal affective disorder, because today is one of those days for me. I live in Colorado, which there's so much sun, and I did that intentionally because I love the sun and it makes me feel better. It's one of the contributors to me feeling better. And today is kind of cloudy, and I noticed a little bit of brain fog, and that I'm not quite my normal concentrated self. So I just wanted to know what maybe you guys worked with seasonal affective disorder in your clinic, or what would you recommend for somebody who is dealing with that?
It's certainly a real thing.
Mhm.
When I first moved to New York, it was about March, and I'd been there for about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden there was one sunny day, and I'm coming from Australia where it's sunny all the time.
Right.
Um, I'm walking down the street one sunny day, and all of a sudden, all these strangers on the street start speaking to me. Hello, hello. I was like, why? What is going on? Why is everyone talking all of a sudden? And then it dawned on me, it's because it was sunny. So it is something that I think people, as we move into winter here in the northern hemisphere, it's something to consider and to be mindful of. If there is the sunny day, get outside as much as possible. Take an extended lunch break, take a day off, take a mental health day, and the sunshine will be good for your mental health. Take yourself off to the park, read a book, whatever you can do to maximize that. Of course, you can also do red light therapy. I've done it once in a sauna. That's another option. There are lots of spa treatment centers that will offer a sort of red light therapy treatment there as well. So that would be something that I would recommend people do in the winter. And there are even at-home devices that you can buy that might be worthwhile investing. It's certainly something I want to invest in, but I want a bigger one. But while I'm traveling, I'm like, oh, let's wait until I finish traveling.
Yeah, it's so true, especially in a place like New York. I've been in New York many times as someone, and there's a lot of this is a tough crowd can be in New York, but if you just imagine that in my head, like people feeling different, and as you mentioned, mental health is number one. I think most people, brain health, mental health, emotional health, are all connected, and if you can't take care of yourself, then you won't be able to take care of your family or others or have any performance or optimization that a lot of people are looking for. So that's why it's so important. Like she said, if you have to take a mental health day off, do it, because if you're not prioritizing yourself, you're never going to get to where you want to go anyway. So
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Brody. And I really think that organizations should, if they don't already have a mental health day like practice in place. It's, especially on the back of the pandemic, we all know how much everyone suffered from that, and mental health wise. And when I've any groups or teams that I have led, I've always told people mental health days exist. If you need a day off because you need to do your laundry, you need more sunshine, you just come to me and you say, hey, Jess, I need a mental health day, and we'll manage as much as possible. Rather than making up some fabricated story, mental health has to be a primary focus for organizations. Otherwise, I just think you have a high staff turnover. And in the 5 years working at this clinic in New York, mental health days were always available. And I would remind people, and every so often someone would take one, and I would celebrate that. And I would let everyone else in the organization know, hi, so-and-so is taking a mental health day. Fantastic. This is great news. Because otherwise, I think people, even if they know that it exists, they feel like, oh, I shouldn't. I don't want to see like there's anything wrong with me. It could be just that your friend is in town and you want to go and see your friend. That is a mental health day. I don't need the reason why. Just go hang out with your friend. And I think that is just so important and needs to be encouraged and championed by a lot more organizations.
Absolutely. We need to normalize the stigma around mental health. And luckily we've come a long way, because now I can talk to somebody and say, hey, I have a therapist. In the past, they would say, oh, you're going to this shrink. What's wrong with this person? We need to normalize things such as this, that it's not all about being a drill sergeant. It's about being more kind and compassionate towards others. The last few things I want to ask you before we end this interview is where do you see brain health going, and in like what direction? Where do you see, what do you see is the future of, maybe more general question, but AI and neurology and things of that nature? Where do you see this space headed?
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think there's going to be two prongs to it. There's definitely going to be the technical side, where a lot of people will have their own at-home device that they can wear to optimize their own cognitive performance. The thing is, by doing that, it's not necessarily going to be personalized to how your individual brain is and what your brain needs, because what your brain needs, might be different to what my brain needs. So I think a lot of these at-home devices that you can use can be great, but working with a practitioner, someone who is trained in the field to figure out what is right for you, you can really optimize your performance there. So there's a lot of new developments and a lot of new companies coming out in the tech space, VR headsets to reduce anxiety and stress, which is super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But on the complete polar opposite, I think a lot of people are going to be coming back to the sort of mind body exercises and natural practices, such as breathing, such as mindfulness, just becoming more in tune with our energy and how we can even change, slow down our heart rate and become more in tune with our intuition and listen to our bodies that way, that we can help to avoid disease and heal ourselves just from, being aware and being more attuned with our senses. So my approach is about really hacking our senses and looking at, I don't consider there to be 5 senses, nor 8 nor 9. I've been studying the senses for quite some time now, and primarily most of the senses fall under touch.
Mhm.
Taste is touch, eyesight is touch, hearing is touch. And so, and touch is so important. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, a lot of us did not experience touch.
No, we didn't.
We were isolated. And that, I think, has had a tremendous impact that we won't even really see the outcome of that, or even studies yet, of how much that has negatively impacted our likelihood of experiencing cognitive decline and dementia. Without the physical touch, even just touching ourselves and activating the receptor cells that we have throughout our whole body, that hasn't been done. So that's why I really encourage people to do the dry brushing as well, so we can get rid of some of the dead cells that are on the excess, and therefore make ourselves available to receive more accurately and synthesize this information that we're receiving. But at the same time, while we activate these receptor cells and activate our senses, we have to make sure that we are protecting our senses. So protecting our hearing, hearing loss, people who experience hearing loss, more likely to experience cognitive decline and lead down that path. Making sure that we are looking after our bodies and not numbing our bodies and our senses through alcohol, through marijuana, through drugs, through even neurotoxins, that exist in our food or the products that we put on our skin. So just to become aware of those sorts of things, I think, is really, really paramount to making sure that we can counter all the effects of the pandemic and really start to catapult our rate of neurogenesis so that we can avoid cognitive decline going forward.
Thank you so much for coming on. Number one, spreading all the wonderful knowledge that you have about the brain. It was a true pleasure, and I'm super excited for, as you say, just more people learning about brain health, neuroplasticity, how it changed my life too. With neuroplasticity, if you had spoken to me 5 years ago, I would have had trouble completing simple sentences. So it's just a wonderful thing and wonderful message that you're spreading. Where can the audience find you on social media or any of these other platforms?
So you can find me at The Brain Bar on Instagram, thebrainbar.com, the website. Basically those two platforms. You can find my brain training programs or the Laughter Club, and learn more about how you can hack your senses too.
Absolutely. Yeah, you heard it. Laugh more. You heard it from a brain expert.
Thanks, Brody. You're awesome.
Thank you.